Hi, listeners. Stories have so much power, and so does whoever controls the narrative. It is time that we dissect and analyze these stories. I am Vipul, and this is Folktales. Hi, everyone. This story is taken from Alexander Afanasyev's Russian fairy folk tales with a very intriguing title, The Witch and the Sister of the Sun. Like the name suggests, it has a witch who is more than a villain. She is a devourer, a destroyer. She is a one-woman apocalypse. And on that witchy note, it's story time. The story begins by introducing us to a royal family with a son named Ivan, a boy who has never been able to speak. One of his favorite people in the world is a groom who tells him stories. Then comes a day when the groom tells him something else. Your mother will soon have a daughter, and you will have a sister. She will be a dreadful witch and will eat up your father and your mother and all their subjects. Ivan is so struck by this confronting revelation that he is driven to speak for the first time in his entire life, to ask his father for a horse. And his father is so struck by that revelation that he gives one without question. Probably he would have done better to ask a lot of questions. Ivan rides away to look for a new family. He comes across an elderly pair of seamstresses and asks them to take him in. Unfortunately, as soon as they have finished breaking a box and sewing it back together, death will come for them. So they regretfully send Ivan away. Next, he meets a man called Vertodób and literally says to him, "Will you take me as your son?" Vertodób, however, is turning oak trees around, and when his task is done, death will come for him as well. Ivan rides away in tears. Then he comes to Vertogór, who is turning mountains for his own cosmic purposes and will die when he is done. But in time, Ivan comes to the Sister of the Sun, who is happy to adopt him and has no pressing engagements with death. Though he is safe and beloved with his new mother, Ivan is desperate to know what has happened in his kingdom, mostly because he has a very clear idea of what has happened in his kingdom. I mean, it was spelled out pretty explicitly. Still, he climbs to the very top of the mountain in order to glimpse the place he left behind and sees a wasteland where everything has been devoured. His weeping draws the concern of the Sister of the Sun. But he won't tell her what's wrong, insisting that the wind blew something into his eye. After he has climbed the mountain for a second time and excused his grief the same way, the sun steps in, telling the wind to stop blowing. So when Ivan climbs the mountain for a third time, he is forced to explain himself to his adoptive mother. He is probably too late to do any earthly good, but he wants to go home and do something. Unlucky for him, his mother is amazing. With magic at her disposal, she gives him a brush, a comb, and 2 apples, which are of course rather more than they appear. When Ivan throws the brush, it becomes a vast range of mountains. Vertogór's death is indefinitely postponed. When Ivan throws the comb, it transforms into an enormous forest of oak trees. Vertodób can't die until everyone is turned. When Ivan comes to the seamstresses, he gives each an apple, and they are restored to youth. What's more, they have a gift to offer in return, a magical handkerchief that will turn into a lake. So onward goes Ivan to the horror show of his old home, where his sister runs to greet him like they are long-lost relatives instead of mass murderer and soon-to-be latest victim. She sits Ivan down in front of a harp and tells him to play for her while she goes to fetch dinner. This is obviously so she knows exactly where he is at all times while she's getting ready for her dinner. But to really spell it out, a little mouse pokes his head out and hisses at Ivan to run for his life. He follows that advice. The mouse runs up and down the harp to trick the witch into believing Ivan is still there, then scampers back into hiding when she returns. Realizing that Ivan is bolted, the witch sets off in unnaturally swift pursuit. He waves that magical handkerchief and produces a lake, which buys him a little time, but his sister is a very fast swimmer, and she is soon close at his heels again. Ivan rides frantically past Vertogór, who throws oak trees in the witch's path. She chews right through the obstacle. Next, Vertodúb sticks a pile of mountains in her way. She scales him like a homicidal mountain goat, but it wins Ivan enough time to flee to his adoptive mother's house. Now that stops the witches for a minute. She demands that Ivan be handed to her. The son refuses. Then the witch proposes a test. She and her brother will lay upon scales, and whoever is the heavier will be the victor. This the son agrees to. Ivan sits upon the scales first. When the witch goes to stand upon the other scale, her weight is such that Ivan flies off the scale into the sky. He is safe with the sun, and the witch remains on the earth, where no one is safe at all. The end. This is an unnerving story on a number of levels, beginning with the prophecy of the witch's birth, which feels like it should have been a kingdom-wide public service announcement, so that more than one person could survive the oncoming destruction. Then there is Ivan's speech disability, which just vanishes away, never to be mentioned again, like all he needed to talk was to be terrified out of his wits. And there is the fact that the witch is not defeated. She reaches a stalemate against forces that she cannot overpower. But there is nothing to stop her continuing to devour whatever she wishes, unless Ivan returns with significantly more firepower. The individual who comes closest to defeating the witch is the mouse. And like I said before, this witch is more than a villain. She is a devourer, a destroyer. She's a one-woman apocalypse. And on that note, bye for now. Let me know your thoughts on the story and our discussion by emailing me on folktalespodcast@gmail.com or through social media at folktalespodcast on Instagram and folktalespod on Twitter. And please rate, review, and like Folktales Podcast, and don't forget to subscribe so you can easily access our weekly stories. If you have any story recommendations, or if you want to come dissect and analyze a story with me, give me a shout out on email or social media, because whatever you do, keep dissecting and keep analyzing.